What do these three foils have in common? They're all the smallest size available in each of their respective ranges. So we've got the Skate 550, the Eagle 690, and the Eagle X 600. Today's video, we're going to be battling these three foils to figure out which one is the absolute winner of the bunch. I'm going to be comparing them using F1's characteristics that they use on their website. So speed, maneuverability, pumping, and glide ratio. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to be able to fact check what they've got on their website versus the actual numbers from my experience riding these foils over the last many months. By the end of this video, we're going to be able to answer which is the best of the small F1 foils. And make sure you stick around to the end because there's a bit more nuance to this than you'd expect. Kicking it off with speed, I've hit similar top speeds on all three of these foils, noting that each were with the Strike V4 5.5 meter wing and the 70 litre rocket wingboard on the 105 mast. But top speed is just one aspect of how fast a foil is. The other side of the speed coin that I wanted to dive into was how fast these foils are around a racetrack, and specifically an upwind downwind racetrack. I'm going to throw it over to Lockie the engineer to explain what velocity made good is, VMG, as this is a really important part of determining which of these foils is the fastest around the racetrack.
Welcome to Velocity Made Good 101. We have our wind direction and we have our board, which may or may not look like a coffin. With Velocity Made Good, you basically have the direction that your board will be going and your speed. So the size of this arrow is your speed. We're interested in the component of the speed that lines up with the wind. So say we're traveling in this direction with this amount of speed. To get our velocity made good, we draw a line perpendicular to the wind. Bear with me. And then we draw an arrow from the base of our speed to the perpendicular line. So this red is our velocity made good, or our VMG. The important thing to know here is if we go and then compare, we can see that our speed in the direction that we're traveling is a lot more than our VMG. The importance of the VMG is it will determine how quickly you get upwind to the mark that you're trying to get to. How do I get the data to get my VMG? That is where the Water Speed app comes into play. So if I go to any of my recent sessions and scroll down to Tacks and Jibes, click on Tacks and Jibes, and we look at this first one, we can get our angle. We can get our angle of 42 degrees and our speed of 14.9. So we look at that and we can make our little triangle. We have here 14.9, amazing handwriting. We draw a little line across. We have an angle here, and that angle is going to be 42 degrees. And then with a little bit of trigonometry magic, we can go 14.9 cosine of 42 degrees. So we're traveling 11.1 knots directly upwind. I'm going to throw it back to Lockie to do the rest of the foil comparison.
Thanks for that, engineer Lockie. So based on that, I've gone and calculated the VMG for upwind and downwind for each of these foils. So as you can see, upwind, the Skate has a little bit of an edge. Then the rankings actually invert for the downwind, surprisingly. And the nuance to this is, I think this is more about stability around a racetrack and a little bit to do with the conditions that I was pushing them around the racetrack. So it was roughly 12 knots. We had some sort of leftover wind chop bumps from a decent amount of fetch. I also think glide has quite a bit to do with this because as you travel through gusts, you carry the speed with you as you exit the gust, and then that'll actually help you enter the next gust with more speed. Overall, you're generating more apparent wind. This will help you hit top speeds more often. Potentially the glide has a big impact. So that's upwind, downwind. We combine those together, we get a racetrack speed winner of actually the Eagle X, and followed by the 690 Eagle and then the Skate 550. So interesting how racetrack speed's almost, it's inverse to top speed. As F1 compares these foils just as a pure speed ranking, I'm gonna add my racetrack speed to my top speed, and that's gonna give me an overall speed ranking for the 3 foils. That's where we're sitting. We've got all 3 foils on level pegging. So take that as you will. And comparing that to the F1 ranking, we already have a little bit of a discrepancy. But it is early days, so let's jump into maneuverability and see how we stack up. It's going to be a bit of a subjective measurement. It's the best we can do for a characteristic like maneuverability. I pretty much aligned with F1 in this one. I gave the Eagle X a little bit of a worse ranking. Pretty obvious, the skate's an absolute winner. It's the king of carving. It was designed for carving. Then the Eagle 690, slightly more spanier than the skate, so not as maneuverable. And then the Eagle X, even larger span, so can't quite roll as aggressively. In saying that, I think all 3 of these foils you can learn to really drive and really carve nicely. And one of the great characteristics of the F1 foils is you can get the tips out and they handle tip breaches really nicely. Jumping to the pumping aspects, we are going to see a bit of a discrepancy between what F1 came up with and what I came up with. I think maybe F1 were heading down the route of what's a good sort of pump foil, so it's sort of like a dock starting style. Me, pumping's more about how you're able to pump the foil whilst flagging out the wing. I basically found that the more stable the platform felt, and combining that with the low end of the foil, it made a super intuitive and easy to pump foil. So I actually went with the Eagle X with the best ranking, the Eagle 690, and then the skate, purely because the high aspect ratio of the Eagle X means that it doesn't roll super easily, so you can really push weight through the foil and pump it nicely. It also being a downwind style foil, you can get away with a lot more because the low end or the range of the foil, the low end and the top end, it's just got a massive range. Followed by the 690, similar reasons, and then the skate because it's, I wouldn't say unstable, but you pump and that pump can be a little bit misdirected and convert to roll. So you've just got to be really accurate with that one. I think the other thing about pump is a lot about efficiency. So aspect ratio 12 is pretty hard to beat. They're my scores up on the screen now, and the F1 scores as well. And we're going to push on to glide. And this one you could pretty much tie to the aspect ratio and call it a day. So I think you'll know exactly where I'm heading with this. And F1, we're in a very similar boat. They had the values a little bit different. So these are the scores. And now for the final verdict. So after all of that, where did we end up? And where does F1's ranking sit relative to my ranking? So on paper, I had the Eagle X with a total score of 8.5 out of 10. The Eagle, 8.25 out of 10. And the skate, 8 out of 10. We compare that to F1's scores right here. So 8.25, 8.125, and 8.375. They really got into the decimals. So that's the on paper ranking, and to be honest, I think it really just reflects the efficiencies of the foils. So the Eagle X being the most efficient, it's got the least induced drag, being higher aspect ratio with the nice wing tips to reduce the tip vortices, having a profile that has massive range, so you've got really good low end and decent top end. Scale that back for the 690, you know, middle of the ground aspect ratio. Still got the wing tips for the efficiency. And then the skate, it's just a carving machine, so it's not necessarily all about efficiency. But I did hint at the start that there was a lot more to this than just which one was the winner on paper. And the reality of this is you're going to want to pick a foil that's going to elevate your sessions to the next level. In order to do that, you really need to answer the question of what do you want to get out of your sessions and what conditions do you have available to you most of the time. That way you can match a foil to the goals that you want to achieve and the conditions that you have available. So personally for me, even though on paper the Skate 550 is technically the worst of the bunch, I would pick this 9 times out of 10 over these other 2 foils. And that's because I want to push myself to be as accurate and smooth, but also fast on my feet as I'm foiling. And the conditions I have available to me are quite choppy most of the time. We have a lot of fetch, especially when the sea breeze is blowing, so we get a nice big wind bump that pops up. So the Skate 550 pairs with that so nicely because it's low aspect ratio, so it doesn't get pushed around by the wave energy as much. And the carve really matches the chop that we get. The other thing about the skate is it doesn't have a good low end. And for most people, that's probably not a good thing, but I really, really enjoy the challenge of forcing myself to be quick on my feet and fast with my hands to get through maneuvers and to surf waves and to just overall lift my game of wing foiling so that when I go and jump on either of these other foils that have more glide, these feel easy. I almost feel like I'm in a bit of a Top Gear episode where you've got Jeremy Clarkson, he's taken this mongrel of a car onto the racetrack, and then he goes into this monologue about how incredible it is because it is a mongrel. That's the Skate 550 for me. It's not the easiest foil. It's 550 square centimeters. It's lower aspect ratio than the other two, but it has so much character and it's so much fun to challenge yourself and push your limits with a foil that doesn't have as much forgiveness. But that's for me, and that's where I'm at in my wing foiling journey, and that's why I wanted to dig into the nuance of this. So where does that leave us with the three foils? For those with similar conditions to me and a little bit further along in their journey, I'd look at the skate range to really push your limits in carve and to react to higher stall speeds and draw sharper lines on waves. The Eagle, for those that just want a foil that does everything so that you have a really wide range of conditions. And then the Eagle X, surprisingly, for people that are a little bit earlier on in their journey, it's actually a really great foil because the massive low end that it has available makes it quite easy and forgiving despite its aspect ratio. If you want any more insight on how these foils would fit specifically with your conditions and your skill level, so chuck some questions in the comments and I will do my best to get back to you guys.